Oh, and also another announcement. On September 9th at 1 p.m., Ann is having a genealogy beginners class at the library. Have to register to attend, so let people know that would like to get involved in genealogy. And has everybody joined the Historical Society? Welcome. Anybody need an application? Okay. Now, first of all, this Leonard Cummins presentation, you talk about a team effort. Well, Roberta was busy getting into the computer and census records and had all sorts of things for this presentation, which I appreciate. Bob Roberts was the person that was able to get me in touch with pictures of Leonard Cummins. Otherwise, we would have had no picture of him. Sherry found courthouse pictures and her marriage record for her parents that will come in here. And Ann Hager was really helpful in getting me connected with the county paper, the editions that had his obituary in it. And I was amazed at how easy it was to get into the county papers there with Ann's help. So thank you to everybody there. So, Leonard Cummins. We're going to talk about him. What was Leonard Cummins like? What was English like then? And we're going to talk about how you can use historical records to do personal history detective work. You can be a PhD, a personal history detective. And this was a fun example of how much information you can collect on a person if you look at all the records. So first of all, let's talk about 1881. That was the year that Leonard Cummins was born. What was the world like in 1881? Well, let me tell you, James Garfield was sworn in as president. But soon after, he was shot by a dissatisfied person, and Chester Arthur replaced him. Now, it was also in 1881 that Billy the Kid escapes from jail. He was later shot and killed. And in 1881 was the gunfight at the OK Corral. What a year it was. Now, with all these shootings, I think that must have been why Clara Barton started the American Red Cross in that year. And I suppose for entertainment, to get away from all that grim news, the Cincinnati Reds played their first game in 1881. And that was the year that Leonard Cummins was born. Now, Leonard, here's some information about him. He was born 6th of December here in Crawford County. His parents were James Jackson Cummins and Mary Grimes. They had a farm just outside of English. Leonard was the second of 7 kids, and James, his father, had a farm in Sterling Township. Now, interestingly, when you look at the census records, 2 houses over from the Cummins was the Highfield family. And guess who lived over there? Hannah. Hannah grew up 2 houses over, and Hannah and Leonard would later marry. Now, what else can we figure out here? Here is a genealogy fan chart that shows his family line. And you see here, I'll just name some of the major lines in the Cummins family. We've got the Cummins, the Flemings, the Harts, the Keimer, excuse me, yep, Keimer or Kilmer. Longest, he's my second cousin twice removed through the longest family, I found out. I didn't know that. The Kincaids and the Downings. And then on Mary Grimes' side, his first wife, we've got the Grimes, the Vandevers, Spears, Ridings, Monk, Jones, Sands, and Sawyer. So a lot of us probably have some connections with his family somehow. And by the way, amongst the resources you can use to pull together stories like this about people, Family Search is free. That's what I use a lot. And Ancestry.com costs money, but it's also got a lot of good information. but you can use it free at the library. So it's good to know that. Now, here are some life facts from the census records. We know that he married Cynthia Hannah Highfield. They had 2 children, Densel and Cedric. And we'll find out later why you never hear much about Densel and Cedric here around Crawford County. In 1910, Leonard shows up as a farmer. That's interesting because we don't think of him as a farmer. But in 1910 he was, at least for that short period of time. In 1920 he shows up as a common school teacher. Now in 1930 he shows up as a boarder at the A.T. Coldballs Hotel in English. A hotel I'd never heard of. Maybe you guys have. And the reason he's a boarder there is because his wife had just died at that point. He was a widower. He later marries Ethel Rankin, and in the 1940 census, he shows as a senior visitor in the county welfare office. And I don't know exactly what a senior visitor is. Does anybody?
I believe that is when they went out to, like a caseworker was. They would actually go over farms and stuff. And I think they was called, I don't know about senior, but visitor.
Well, that makes sense then. He did that for several years. And let's see, in 1950 census, he shows as the minister at the English Christian Church. He was a member of the English Christian Church for years and years. And 1950 census is later in his life. So at this point, he was retired from his other occupations and devoted to the ministry. So that was a lot of interesting information from the census records. Now here, this is up at the top here, you see a copy of the 1940 census for English in Sterling Township. And that yellow highlighted line at the very top is Leonard Cummins and his wife Ethel. Now here's more information you can pull out of census records. And by the way, 1950 is the latest census record. 1950 is the latest you can see. This is 1940. But for instance, we find out that Leonard Cummins was working with the county welfare department and made $1,080 in 1939. So you can actually find income here on some census records. In this 1940 census, you can look at the neighbors because the census taker would just go down the street or the road, one house after the next. So here are some of the neighbors that were close to the Cummins family. And so this gives you a flavor for their neighborhood. There was Glenn Mock, the attorney. There was Frank McGovern, a drayman. Okay, who knows what a drayman is? I didn't. So Google it. What do you think?
Isn't it like a peddler, sort of?
Sort of. Actually, the drayman was the person that hauled the beer around. In early days, a drayman would use a horse and a wagon to haul the barrels of beer. At this point, Frank McGovern, who was a neighbor of the Cummins, he used a truck to haul his beer around. There was also Colbert Hodge, who was the railroad telegrapher. Melton and Celia Melton, retired teachers. Charles Rodman was the steam railroad depot agent. And in the census records, it actually says steam railroad depot manager. Emmett Johnson was the furniture company night watchman, and I'm guessing that's the furniture factory that was in English. William Patton was the drugstore proprietor. Kenneth Patton was the assistant postmaster. And Bill Beasley was a high school teacher, but Bill was living with his mother on East 5th Street at this point. So he was a young man. Interesting stuff you find from the census. Now, what did he look like? How would we know? What if we couldn't find a picture? Well, guess what? Online you can find his registration card for, in this case, World War I. Leonard Cummins signed up or registered for the draft in World War I. Hang on here just a second. He was He was age 36 at this point, so he was already moving along here.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You notice you said he was born in 1881. Look at his birth date up there.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the guys did that. They made themselves older so they could go in the military. That's what he's done there.
There you go. Thanks for catching that. It's part of the interesting stories you find here. Here's this other page of that registration for that World War I. And look what it says. It says he's medium height, medium build, he's got light blue eyes and light brown hair. And you can find this about a lot of relatives or other people in your family that you may not have a picture of. And I think this was from Ancestry.com that I saw these, or maybe Family Search. But then there's also the World War II registration. This was in 1942 that he registered. He was age 60 at this point, so I don't think they got to him.
He's got 81 on there, though, doesn't he?
He does. He got it right this time. And on the other side of that card, it gave more information. He's 5'8" and 165 pounds. So he wasn't very tall, but he was a thin, average-sized guy. Still has those blue eyes, but his hair is gray, and his complexion is light. So we know some things about him, but thanks to Bob Roberts, we have pictures. Bob had a picture of a Christian church group, English Christian church group from the 1920s, and that's the one on the left. And then this picture with Estill, that's a group picture of the Eastern Star group that they belonged to. And by the way, I thought Eastern Star was the women's group, but apparently the men and the women belonged. Is that true? Okay, well, I learned something. But he's a good-looking man. Now the question is, he performed over 2,000 marriages. That's a lot of marriages. Where did he perform them? Did he perform them at the courthouse, or the English Christian church, or his home? What do you think?
All three.
My mother said his dad married 100-some on his house.
Hey, really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you're right. All three.
Yeah, I think all of them.
But Bob Roberts did tell me that he did perform a lot of them at his house.
Yeah.
So he was just there for people.
Yeah, he was clerk for 8 years and some others.
That's right, clerk for the court.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, he married my
So he was never ordained. He wasn't really a minister.
Oh, he was.
Yeah, he was.
We'll get to that as a matter of fact. He was ordained a minister, an elder in his church in 1917 or 18, something like that. We'll get to that later. But here's just an example of two of the marriage certificates. The first one on the left side is William Crawford and Pauline Stanford. That's my parents. And Leonard Cummins married them on July the 4th of 1943. And Sherry was looking at the marriage certificate for her parents. Her parents married while her dad was still in World War II in the Army, and he was back on leave. And that one's over here, Nova Coleman, Violet Jones. And interestingly, it's signed, of course, by the Leonard Cummins, minister, but Estill Cummins. And so because we were putting this together, we realized, oh, this was his wife that was the witness and signed. Well, I think, obviously, with 2,000 marriages, do any of you have anybody in your family that Leonard Cummins married?
Yeah,
Look at it. I mean, well, the majority of us. Now, the other source of information for Leonard Cummins was the obituaries, and it was really good information. Here's what we learned from the obituaries. He was a member of the English Christian Church. He was Sunday school superintendent, teacher, board member, minister. He was ordained an elder in July of 1917 and performed his first marriage August the 13th of 1917, not long after. And I want to read a little bit about his church service from the obituary. It says, at an early age, he united with the Christian church in English and remained a faithful member throughout his years. At various times, he served as Sunday school superintendent, teacher, board member of the church. He became a deacon soon after he united with the church, and in 1917 became an elder, holding that position throughout his life. On many occasions, in the absence of the regular pastor, he served as the minister of the church. Now, so he was a minister, truly. He was a teacher for 28 years. This is what the obituary said about that. His long years of service for the county and the people he loved made him one of the most revered men Crawford County in southern Indiana has ever known. During his 28 years of his teaching career, he endeared himself to hundreds of students who continued to come to him for advice long after they left school. He kept his early love for children throughout his years, and few children in the community but looked forward to the hearty greeting he always gave them. I would have liked to have met Leonard Cummings on the street because I've got the feeling that he would have had a big smile and a hello, a good man. He was a speaker at many school, religious, and patriotic events and funerals. And let me read what it said about that. Every church, school, and public gathering became his platform as he was continually being called upon to speak to some group. Whether it was some educational, religious, or patriotic address, he rarely refused a call. He preached funerals in all parts of the county, regardless of the distance, weather, or roads, and continued to do this long after his health was seriously impaired. So he was obviously a committed man. He was there to serve people. When urged to give up this work, his answer was that he owed it to his friends to help any way he could. Thousands of people will long remember the comforting messages he brought. He was Crawford County Circuit Court for 8 years, a clerk for 8 years. He was elected to the county council the year before he died. And he was also a Mason and a member of the Eastern Star. Now, I wanted to read you one thing more about the marriages. Hang on here a second. This is the last thing from the obituary. One of the proudest moments of his life was marked by a record found in his box of keepsakes, which shows his ordination on July 1917 as an elder in his church. This started a life of devotion to the people all over southern Indiana. On August 13, 1917, he performed his first marriage ceremony, and throughout the years, the number of ceremonies grew to hundreds, actually over 2,000. Matter of fact, in 1943, I went over and Roberta helped me find the marriage book, and I looked at all the marriages in Crawford County done in 1943, and half of them were done by him. So he was by far the person doing many, many marriages. Going on here, he took a personal interest in each marriage. It became a source of personal pride and joy to him when children from those marriages would come and ask him to unite them in marriage because he'd done the same for their parents. So he married generations. So what was he like? Well, Bob Roberts said he was a good speaker, great sermons and prayers. He had a pleasant personality, and everybody liked him. He had a good smile. Sounds like a good man. And Louis shared this, that his father had told him, Louis' father had asked him why he went into taverns. And he said, well, you get one every once in a while. In other words, you find somebody that he could help. And I thought that was an interesting story. Louis, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
This is information I got from the death certificate. And once again, from Family Search and Ancestry, you can find these things. He died 19th of February 1951 at St. Edward's Hospital in New Albany. And by the way, I don't even know where St. Edward's was, but
It's Floyd. Yeah, they changed the name to Floyd.
oh, is it where the Floyd
Well, it
County?
wasn't exactly there, it was, it was,
Warren County.
what's it,
Was it?
one street, one way, one
State
state.
Street.
No, it wasn't
No,
State Street, the other one,
Oh.
Spring Street.
Yeah.
So it was close, but not exactly.
Randy and Tom's.
Okay.
That's where, yeah, that's him.
He died of heart disease. He was buried 21st of February in the English cemetery. And the funeral director was Adkins and Tucker, English, Indiana. So it's one thing to know all these facts about a person, but I think one of the interesting things is to figure out, what can we learn from Leonard Cummins? Well, we can learn something about teaching, because teaching has a direct impact on hundreds of people, and he did through his teaching. You can learn about caring about others. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, I've got the feeling that people knew that Leonard Cummins cared about them. Service. I'll tell you what, he made a difference by serving a lot of people, regardless of weather, time, or even his health. And living intentionally. I've got the feeling that Leonard Cummins learned from an early age to work and work hard and with a purpose. And we've all benefited from the life of Leonard Cummins. So those are some of the things we can learn. Now, there is one other thing I wanted to mention to you, and that is, why do we not have Leonard Cummins' sons here in English or in Crawford County? What happened to them? Well, education apparently was a big deal in the Cummins family, because when Leonard Cummins died, Denzel, the oldest son, was at Western State College of Colorado in Gunnison, Colorado, and Cedric was teaching at the University of South Dakota in Vermillion, South Dakota. And so they got their degrees, they became teachers in colleges, and they left to the west of here to teach. Well, I hope all of you have found some interesting little facts about Leonard Cummins, because we've all been impacted by his life even today, generations later. And I hope you've also seen that there's a lot of interesting ways that you can get information about people and put together their stories in ways that you may not have realized before. So I hope you'll become a PhD, personal history detective, and put together some stories for your family as well. Thank you very much.